the battle, but it takes discipline.
It does
You have
take
to be
discipline.
very thoughtful about the things that you look at, the places that you go, and the things that you do.
Well, when we think about, again, how the brain is built and how when we look at something sensual, it releases that pleasure chemical, we need to realize that it's not just the porn, but it is the R-rated movies. It is that girl in the string bikini on the beach. And we need to really cut all those things out of our mind and out of our eyes so that we can have a completely free life.
Well, there's a quote in your book from a wrestling coach who says that there's pain in life. There's the pain of discipline. It's painful to discipline yourself and deny yourself. But there's also the pain of regret.
Right.
And the pain of discipline lasts for a moment.
Right.
And brings a good yield, and the pain of regret lasts a lifetime. Fred, how many Christian people do you think are watching this program today who are living a life of regret?
Well, it would be completely countless. And a lot of us know, in fact, most of us go into our pubescent and teen years saying to ourselves, we're going to stay pure until marriage. Very few of us actually do. And that all brings regret because, you know, in the last analysis, every guy knows deep in his heart that he's really built by God to protect the women in his life. And when we recognize the fact that we haven't left all the women in our lives better off for having known us, but we've actually used them for our own pleasure, there is a pain, there is a regret that is there. Now, for me, God has obviously forgiven me and he's taken the regret away on some level, but that regret still drives me in wanting to be the kind of man that I originally said I was going to be, the kind that doesn't hurt women. I now am that man, even though there was a 10, 15-year period where I wasn't. And I think that what we wanted to do in this book, Hero, was to paint that picture that it is possible to be that kind of man, but you do have to discipline yourself and do the things God's called you to do.
What about people who are watching who find themselves in similar circumstances as you? They want to be free from pornography. They want to cherish their wives or their girlfriends. They want to leave women better for knowing them. But they're mired in this, and we're such a highly sexualized society. You really have to use a lot of discipline to protect yourself. But for those who have faltered in the past, today is a new day.
Oh, it's always a new day with God. I mean, his whole game is restoration. That's what he's all about. He sent his son so that we can have a relationship with him again. And once we have that relationship, he wants to kind of bring us back to original specs. Now, one of the great things about the book is it has both of our voices. Jason, who never did fall to sexual sin, and mine, who did, but God has restored. And so for any man reading a book like this, they can feel hope.
My hope in this interview today, Fred, is that people are not going to feel condemned, but they are going to feel that great hope. Because you didn't want Jason to grow up and follow the things that your father had done, and your grandfather had done, your great-grandfather and his father. You wanted him to have a much better life. And boy, did Jason ever come through. This book details, as you said, it's co-written with Jason, and he tells his story. He made a commitment early on in life, very early in life, that he was going to be different, that he was going to remain sexually pure in every sense of the word. Tell us about that decision.
Well, you know, Jason is not an unusual boy. I mean, it's not like he has an unusual level of self-discipline or anything like that. He just knew that being sexually pure was going to have a big impact on his relationship with God, and he loved God. So, you know, he made the decision early to say to himself, look, I'm going to be a hero for God's purposes, regardless of what that costs me in the world. And as a matter of fact, he basically said, look, if it's going to cost me socially, that's fine with me. You see, that's exactly the opposite of how I was. I mean, when it started to cost me socially, I buckled. Of course, I didn't have God in my life, but see, he did, and he made that decision. I remember one time, for instance, in junior high, when he was in class and the teacher was showing a film as kind of a reward to the class, and it was a PG-13 movie. Well, in our home, PG-13 movies just don't fly most of the time because of the sensuality. And he knew, even though he hadn't seen the film, that it probably was going to be inappropriate. So he got up, walked to the teacher's desk and said, look, I don't think this is going to be appropriate for me as a Christian. Can I sit in the hallway? Well, that started a chain of I mean, a lot of the kids thought he was crazy, and of course, he became a bit of a pariah there for a little while as he, you know, dealt with that social ramification. But you know, he made that decision. He continued to make that decision all the way through junior high and high school whenever films like that were shown. By the time he got to the end of high school, he had a lot of friends, and people really had begun to understand who he was. So, but he had to make that decision to be willing to accept social cost for the sake of the higher call. And that's something as Christians that we're not often taught these days, but he picked it up early.
Well, we have a picture of the hero. As a matter of fact, we're going to start, we've got a picture of your entire family.
Yes.
There you are, your wife. Tell us who we're seeing.
Yeah, okay. Well, obviously on the left is me, and then that's my wife. I have my hand on her shoulder, and then Rose is Jason's wife,
right,
and Jason is on the right.
Okay, there's another picture that I want to show because this is the moment. This is the very, very first time.
Kiss.
Oh, this is going to make me cry, Fred. This is the first time that your son Jason ever kissed a girl.
Exactly.
And the first girl that he ever kissed was his wife.
Exactly, and you should have seen you should have heard the roar. I mean, there was a standing O. I mean, everybody. It was like a sporting event. People jumped up and cheered. It was great.
Okay, and who do we have here?
Okay, on the left, of course, is me. Jason's in the center on his wedding day, and on the right is my youngest son, who has chosen to make the same step along the same path, and he's hoping to save his first kiss for his marriage too.
Now, Jason is a normal young man.
He is.
And if he can do it, others can do it. But I want to talk about some of the myths that you tackle in your book that are telling our young people. First off, I believe if we tell our young people that we have high expectations of them, I believe most of them will meet those expectations, if not all. If we have very low expectations, well, they'll meet those expectations. So one of the myths that you tackle is the fact that God made us as sexual beings. We have sexual, this kills me, sexual needs, and those needs must be met as soon as they arise, and they arise at puberty.
Right. And you know, that part of that argument is we are wired sexually, and of course, if we look at ourselves, we really are wired sexually well. God has been very kind to us and given us bodies that are wired well for that. But the same thing is true on the opposite. Just because we're wired for that doesn't really mean that we have to do it, and it doesn't mean that we should sacrifice God's principles for the sake of our wiring. He was very clear to us that you know, we are to stay sexually pure for a lot of very good reasons, and he wouldn't have called us to that if it weren't so. Now, one of the things that I saw different between Jason and other young men is a lot of young men look at that and they get frustrated by their sexuality, and they're in college and going, you know, why didn't God give us more of a release for all these pressures? But the guys who I think do best in this purity area are the ones that would say, look, this is God's call. I'm going to find a way to do it, and they don't struggle against it. They don't strain against it all the time, and they just simply slide into the kinds of pathways they need to go in order to keep that word.